Dear Ms. Nandi, as the organizer of this workshop, the honorable speakers, and ladies and gentlemen present in this workshop, welcome to Workshop on Sex Education 2020. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Enggal, and I'll be your Master of Ceremony for this workshop. I would also like to thank you all participants who have gathered here in this beautiful occasion. Now I'll be reading the event sequence for today's workshop. First, we'll be hearing materials from Counselor Pingkan, and next materials by Counselor Lutfian, and finally materials by Dr. Adam. Let's start by the first event, which is materials from Mrs. Pingkan. Let's join hands in welcoming Mrs. Pingkan.
Good morning everyone, glad to see you all here. My name is Pingkan Falina and I would like to deliver the basic understanding of sex education. First of all, let's take a look on the definition of sex education. So sex education is the instruction of issues relating to human sexuality, including birth control, sexual reproduction, sexual activities, human sexual anatomy, and sexual abstinence. Furthermore, John J. Bird said that sex education stands for the protection, presentation, extension, improvement, and development of the family based on accepted ethical ideas. Now, as we already know what sex education stands for, let's moving on to find out how sex education began to be applied. Traditionally, sex education was thought to be exclusively the responsibility of family and religion. So adolescents in many cultures were not given any information about sexual matters, and the discussion about these issues were being considered taboo. However, the progressive education movement on the late of 19th century has led to the introduction of social hygiene in North American school curricula and the advent of school-based sex education. Then, most of the information in the middle of 20th century was obtained informally from friends and the media, so everyone can find out about such information. However, much of this information was deficient. It is getting worse when this lack of proper information affects teenagers' perception during their puberty period, when curiosity about sexual matters were peaking. Ironically, this deficiency has led to the increasing incidence of teenage pregnancies, particularly in the Western countries after 1960s. Therefore, as a part of each country's effort to reduce the high level of teenage pregnancies, the program of sex education were introduced. To find out more about the details of sex education, you can see by yourself the timeline listed in the handout that has been distributed. As a part of health education, sex education also definitely has a myriad of importances that we should be aware of. Besides it is vital for young people's development and well-being, it also contributes to the academic success and positive mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional health. Now, let's take a look at the objectives and the other urgencies of sex education. The objective of sex education are to influence young people understand the body structure of men and women by acquiring the knowledge about birth. And the urgencies are, first, a proper sex education will nurture good values and not leave a bad impression. The second one, sex education teaches young people to establish and accept the role and the responsibility of their own gender. And the third one, sex education is kind of holistic education that teaches an individual about the attitude and the skills of interpersonal relationship. It also helps an individual to cultivate a sense of responsibility towards others as well as oneself. After knowing the urgencies of sex education, it can be seen that sex education must be given to influence young people's development. In addition, sex education cannot also be done in the academic settings, but also in the family, because parents also hold a significant role in providing sex education for the child. That's all my material for now. Thank you.
That was a wonderful speech. Now we all know what sex education is. Now let's progress to our next speaker, which is Mr. Lutfian. Please give an applause.
Hello everyone, I'm Lutfian Hadiarso. Today I want to talk about the misconceptions surrounding sex education and the effects of the lack of sex education and those misconceptions. So let's delve into the first part. Here I have a few myths and I want to set them straight. The first one is sex education encourages teens to have sex. This misbelief is one of the factors that makes sex education still lacking and becomes such a taboo topic to talk about. As what Miss Pingkan had said, sex education has become an urgency that needs to be taught to children. The purpose of a good sex education program is to teach about the biology of the reproductive organs, how pregnancy happens, how diseases are spread, and how to prevent those undesirable outcomes from happening. Sex education gives students the tools they need to make responsible and healthy choices. The second one is sex education only teaches about sex. This is also a false notion. Sex education also teaches about the biological, psychological, and social aspects of leading a healthy sexual life in the future. This consists not only about the physical acts of sex, but also anatomy, gender identity, awareness of sexual abuse, consent, birth control measures, and prevention of STIs and AIDS. These misconceptions will have severe consequences if they're still being believed and not being corrected. Combined with the lack of sex education, those consequences can even be perilous, especially for teenagers and students. Consequences are, the first one is lack of knowledge about STIs and STDs. Without the knowledge about sexual health issues, teenagers will not know about STIs or sexually transmitted infections and STDs or sexually transmitted disease such as chlamydia, gonorrhea, and genital herpes. The second one is a risk of unwanted pregnancy. Believing that birth control doesn't work can lead into the abandonment of contraceptions altogether. This can result in unwanted pregnancy, which can be dangerous, especially for teenagers because their body is not ready to conceive a child yet. Next one is impacts on sexual behaviors. Sex education also teaches about issues like mutual consent and sexual coercion. Children who are not educated on matters related to their sexual well-being are vulnerable to harmful sexual behaviors and less well equipped to report inappropriate touching or abuse. And the fourth one is less understanding about gender and sexual diversity. Sex education can be effective in addressing discriminatory attitudes toward marginalized groups such as the LGBTQ plus community, women, and indigenous women. Without the age-appropriate and accurate information about gender and sexual identity, children are less likely to practice acceptance and promote inclusivity. And the last, spread of those misconceptions can start new misconceptions. The example is, not that long ago there was a news saying swimming in public pool can lead to pregnancy. It's false because, as you may or may not already know, sperm can only live for a short period of time outside of the body, especially in chlorinated water. So the chances of pregnancy after swimming in a public pool are slim to none. The solution for these consequences lie in the knowledge given by sex education. Sex education is necessary because it can help dismantling those misconceptions and prevent these effects from happening. That's all from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you for the materials, Counselor Fian. Let's educate ourselves so that we won't be misled by misconceptions and myths. Now we're moving on to our final speaker, Dr. Adam.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adiyatma. I'm glad to see you in there. As Mr. Lutfian has said before, that misconception and misunderstanding of sex education can lead us into myths that are not true. Therefore, it is necessary to harmonizing the understanding of sexual education. Sexual education can lead us to prevent young marriage, sexual violence and rape, prevent us from misunderstanding of sexual relationship, and also it prevents us from pregnancy. Sexual violence, young marriage, and pregnancy can be done with the use of contraception tools. Contraception tools has many types, but I will only explain four of them. The first one is family planning pills, or as we know as pill copy. It has two types. The first one is it contains progesterone only. The second one is it contains mixed hormones. It has several advantages and disadvantages. The first one is the value rate is only 8%. It prevents us from pregnancy. It doesn't need several maintenance, and also it is cheap enough. But it has several disadvantages. The first one is it doesn't protect you from sexual transmitted disease, and also it is only for a single use, but it can smoothen your menstruation and reducing your cramp during your period. The second one is implant. The size of this contraception tools is only about a matchstick, which usually it is inserted into your bottom of your skin, usually on your upper arm. The value rate is only 1% because it pulls out your progesterone hormone, but it has several advantages. The first one, it is expensive enough. It is need to be maintained for every 3 and 5 years. It doesn't protect you from sexual transmitted disease, and also it is expensive enough. But and also it is not smoothen your menstruation, so you will sometimes get cramp and you will feel ill on your stomach. The third one is IUD or intrauterine device. It is a disc-shaped contraception tools which inserted into your uterus. The failure rate of this contraception tools is only 7%, but it needs several maintenance after inserted into your uterus, and also it is expensive enough. It also not smoothen your menstruation. Sometimes you will get your menstruation is not smooth, and also it can make you have a high blood pressure, so it is not recommended for people who have heart disease, liver disorder, and also high blood pressure. But it is effective enough to prevent sperm to fertilizing an egg. The last one is, as we know, it is the most common contraception tools. We can find it on supermarket or mini market for about 15,000 rupiah. This contraception tool is condom. Condom is divided into two types. The first one is condom for male. The second one is condom for female. Condom has failure rate for about 15% if not used properly, but it has several advantages. The first one is it protects you from sexual transmitted disease. It prevents sperm entering the woman's body, and also it is cheap enough, and it can find almost everywhere and anywhere. But it has several disadvantages. The first one is it is for single use. It is disposable. If you cannot wash it if you using it once, and also it has a high failure rate, so it is not recommended for a long time sexual relationship. The use of contraception tools can help us to have safe sex, which means we now are not afraid of pregnancy, sexual violence, and also young marriage. But there are some notes that do not have sex with your boyfriend or girlfriend because it is prohibited from religions and also in society. Maybe that's all for me. Thank you.
We have now reached the end of our event. We can conclude from this that sex education is an important matter to learn, but it's often overlooked, mainly because how sex is a taboo thing to talk about in our society. Yet, being less knowledgeable about this subject may cause misconception and myths that would endanger people. There are several types of contraceptions. that each one of them has their own pros and cons. It would be very nice to understand them to prevent further misbehave. Let us educate our children and ourselves to prevent anything from going wrong. Hopefully all of this has been a valuable lesson for all of you. Thank you so much for the experience, and before we close this workshop, I want to say sorry from the deepest part of my heart for any mistakes unintended. See you on next occasion. Thank you and good afternoon.